Mr. Secretary, Secretary Pompeo, do you believe that the Iranians shot down the Ukrainian International Airways plane? And if the Iranians shot that plane down, will there be consequences?
We do believe that it's likely that that plane was shot down by an Iranian missile. We're going to let the investigation play out before we make a final determination. It's important that we get to the bottom of it. I've been on the phone. I was on the phone with President Zelensky. Just before I came here, I was on the phone with my Canadian counterpart. They are working to get their resources on the ground to conduct that thorough investigation. We'll learn more about what happened to that aircraft. And when we get the results of that investigation, I am confident we and the world will take appropriate actions in response.
What might those actions be, and how certain are we that this was, in fact, what it seems to be, at least to me, which is an Iranian missile strike on a plane by accident? We have General Anthony Tata joining us now. He is also a novelist. His latest work is Double Crossfire, which came out last month. General Tata, thanks so much for being on the show.
Great to be with you, Buck.
So it seems that Iran didn't clear its airspace during this missile strike on, people keep referring to it as a missile strike on us. It's also a missile strike on Iraqi soil, Iraqi airspace and facilities, and endangering their personnel. So it's really an active war against both of us. Is there any doubt in your mind that the Iranians were at least responsible for this? I mean, we can find out more of the details.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind, Buck. Yeah, you can visualize it, that there's a operator of a Russian surface-to-air missile system, and bad command and control, and a plane takes off. They think it might be a cruise missile coming in, and they slam it out of the sky. You don't need to be a fiction writer to come up with that scenario. And what's crazy though is guys like Pete Buttigieg blaming Trump for this action, when in fact Iran. This is just an example of how wayward Iran is right now. They have completely lost their way, and they've been lost. And this is an example that they have Soleimani out there sowing terror all throughout the Middle East. We kill him rightfully, and when you think about the 602 deaths, the factor is 10 times that are wounded. So that's 6,600 people killed and wounded just by the explosive form penetrators that Soleimani and Iran supplied to the militias in Iraq. And then you think about the thousands of families from those 6,600 people. Soleimani's dead. I'm glad he's dead. He deserves to be dead. And there's no fault, no blame whatsoever on America or President Trump for defending the U.S. embassy. I don't know what the Democrats need for imminent threat. I think it's body bags. Benghazi is their example of responding to an imminent threat a couple of days later. And President Trump, thank God, if it was minutes or days or hours away, he responded and stopped an attack by the Iranians, by the militias coordinated by Soleimani on our personnel and property in Iraq. And so Iran is lost. They are wayward, and they need to take a step back and figure out what the hell they're doing.
Now, General Tata, you were in the military for 28 years. You were the deputy commanding general of the 10th Mountain Division when it was in Afghanistan. You have seen the enemy. You know the enemy. You understand the calculations that they make on the battlefield. How do you see, now that Qasem Soleimani has been taken out by this president, how do you see that affecting Iranian calculations vis-a-vis us and our allies in the region and around the world, really, going forward?
Yeah, Buck, great question. You cannot estimate the impact that killing Soleimani has had, because networks, leadership, Elon, all of that stuff means something. He's been lionized by our press, the Western press. They covered his funeral and all of that because they're fawning over him with his salt and pepper eyebrows, as the New York Times described him, and all of that. He's an evil, terrible guy, but he had a vast network from the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon through Syria, all throughout the northern tier of Africa into the lower part of the Southwest Asia. And so with him gone, you just can't reinvent those networks. The trust that he had, and trust is a huge thing. Power, trust, all of those intangibles that he built over decades of operating in that region evaporated. And yeah, he has deputies, he has other people that were traveling with him, one of whom was killed. And And so now, the successor has to go try to reinvent all that. I don't think so. If he does, it'll take time, and power vacuums will get filled. And so that's really what we need to be thinking about is who's going to be filling the power vacuums, not just of Soleimani, but of all these micro relationships that he had in Lebanon and Syria, Iraq and Saudi Arabia, Yemen, northern tier of Africa, Somalia, and because it was vast. They are the number one state sponsor of terror, and they just lost their. The analogy is we took their queen off the chessboard. He was moving all around the world, and in particular Southwest Asia, and they responded by moving a pawn to an empty square, and that's where they are right now. And they're trying to figure out where they go from here without that piece on the chessboard.
Now, I know when you finally entered civilian life, you left and you were senior brass in the military, but I know you're also in contact with folks all the way up and down the chain of command, obviously. And have you gotten a sense from some of those that you either were commanding or that that you served with, that there's a sense that this was justice done, especially meaning justice done by taking out Qasem Soleimani because of the hundreds of Americans that he, and I think this is important for everyone to understand too, he wasn't ordering Americans to be taken out because Americans were trying to take out Iranians. He was ordering Americans to be maimed and killed in Iraq, a theater of operations outside of Iran, because he thought it was advancing Iranian power interests. It was not a defensive action. Have you been hearing from people that taking out Qasem Soleimani feels like justice for a lot of those who serve?
Yeah, absolutely. Every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and their family members that with whom I served and who I have had the opportunity to communicate with are glad he's dead. They knew who this guy was. Probably 90% of the country didn't know who he was, but it's very personal to all of us that were in the military or three-letter agencies who were over there, as were you. And it's a personal thing. When I've lost soldiers that to explosive form penetrators, and those came from Iran. Those were strategized to be in place by Soleimani. The networks that Soleimani created were the EFP networks and Sadr City and all of those really, really tough areas that where we had really tough combat and lots of casualties. That was at the hands of the Shia militias that were fighting us, as you said, to advance Iranian interests, because their ultimate end state was to have a Shia government, which they have in Baghdad, and to increase their hegemony and their drive to power in the region. The Persians and Arabs have hated each other for thousands of years, and now all of a sudden Persia has an inroad into the Arab world in Baghdad, and it's a really interesting dynamic that's happening today.
Yeah, I remember being in Baghdad 2008, and just my position, my opinion was, I was hoping some of these bad guys from the Shia militias and that are tied in with the Iranians, I was hoping that, for example, Muqtada al-Sadr was going to find himself on the wrong end of a JDAM. But anyway, so I've not forgotten those guys and what they were doing at all, and I know those who were serving on the front lines and in combat roles certainly haven't. They haven't forgotten that in the least. We're speaking to General Tata. He's talking to us about what's going on in Iran. And I also want to ask you, General, because you were Deputy Commanding General for 10th Mountain Division in Afghanistan. And, I was in Afghanistan in 2010, and I just feel like it's the same routine year in, year out, year in, year out. And we're just trying to hold this whole thing together. I understand the downside if we were to finally draw down, but I also understand the downside of continuing military operations that are really halfway, which is probably a generous way to describe it right now. What do you think that the president, if you were advising the president on this issue right now, especially going into this election, to make bold decisions on Afghanistan, what would you say he should do?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that we should begin a wholesale exchange of our troops, probably 10-1 with private military contractor force that can secure Bagram Air Base and Kandahar Air Base and keep over-the-horizon forces at those two special operations forces, Rangers, and et cetera, that can raid terrorist hideouts. Meanwhile, it's a law of diminishing returns that we've had on the training the Afghan National Police, Afghan National Army, and building capacity in their government. Either they've got it or they don't by now, right, after 19 years. And so I am all for getting our troops out of there and having some kind of a coalition of private military contract force over there to continue to advise the Afghan National Army, Afghan National Police, and then begin to unstick ourselves from that tar baby and bring our men and women home.
And so it sounds to me like you are supportive of, and I don't know if you've worked with him or talked about this, but Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater, he has been, he's written in the Wall Street Journal about this. Are your plans very similar, or?
Yeah, Eric and I co-authored an article for Fox Digital that basically says just that.
Okay, so you guys are on the same page about what that plan would be. 'Cause I'm familiar. I've talked to him about it. I'm familiar with his work on this issue, that issue as well. Oh, well, General Tato, really appreciate your time today, and of course, we thank you for your service. Just want to note, your novel Double Crossfire just came out last month. My understanding is proceeds from that still go to help wounded veterans. Is that the case?
I am the chairman of the board of the North Carolina Heroes Fund, and I give a big chunk of money to them every year from my royalties. That's correct.
All righty. Everyone go check it out, Double Crossfire. General Tato, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Buck.
I know the Republican leader must be upset he cannot exert total control over this process, but Speaker Pelosi has done just the right thing, and I can understand why Leader McConnell is so frustrated. If the Speaker had sent the articles of impeachment over to the Senate immediately after they passed, Senate Republicans could have moved to dismiss the articles. There was a lot of talk about that a while ago. There wouldn't have been a fair or even a cursory trial, and they might have even tried to dismiss the whole articles before Christmas. Instead, over the past few weeks, not only have they been prevented from doing that, there have been several crucial disclosures of evidence that appear to further incriminate the president.
Schumer's delusional. We know that, right? Or maybe he's just a really practiced liar. I was probably both. We've got breaking news for you. That was what Schumer was saying about Pelosi's gambit here to delay sending the articles of impeachment through. Turns out Pelosi is going to send the articles through. This just happened. This is up on Politico now. Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced she will transmit the articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump next week. This just broke today, ending a heated standoff with Senate Republicans over the terms of the impeachment trial. Oh, looks like my man Jesse Kelly, who's out with a sniffle today, from what I understand. Looks like Jesse Kelly owes the Buckster a steak. I'm not saying I'm always right, but I'm pretty much always right. So here we are. Pelosi is going to send it over. Yesterday, McConnell also signed on to his Senate GOP resolution to change the chamber's rules and dismiss Trump's impeachment if House Democrats didn't transmit the articles within a certain time frame. Yesterday, he showed his true colors and made his intentions to stonewall a fair trial even clearer by signing on to a resolution that would dismiss the charges, Pelosi wrote. My friends, this whole impeachment fiasco is just a giant point of evidence, a giant piece of evidence of how crazy and lame and absurd the Democrats have really gotten. I mean, they should be ashamed of themselves for what they've done here. Absurd stuff from the Democrats. You've got to be kidding me. We went through all this for what? For what? So that Cocaine Mitch can say hello to my little friend and is adios. This is dunzo. That's what's about to happen here. There's not going to be any big grandstandy trial. There's not going to be any removal of the president. So what? We spent as a country 3 months just having to sit around and marinate in the machinations and pseudo agony and we don't want to impeach the president. It's going to make us so sad. We just wish we could avoid it, but we can't avoid it because the president's such a mean man. It has been so terrible. And this is also pierced, I believe, the mythology around Nancy Pelosi as some kind of grand strategist. She is not some grand strategist at all. Like I said, she is cunning and she is ruthless, which can get you very far, but that's not the same as being intelligent and being a grand strategist. Kevin McCarthy understands what's been going on here. Please play Producer Mark, clip 3.
Now let's first talk about the impeachment. When you sit and read and listen to lawmakers in Speaker Pelosi's own party, have no idea what she is doing. Senator Feinstein, the senator from California, my senator and Speaker Pelosi's senator, but she's even more. She's the hometown senator for Nancy Pelosi. She said, the longer it goes on, the less urgent it becomes. So if it's serious and urgent, send them over. If it is not, don't send it over.
What else do you have to know? It can't be both. It can't be serious and urgent, and then you sit on it and do nothing and try to figure out how to make it seem more serious than it is and more urgent than it is. It cannot be both things, right? You can't have an ambulance taking somebody to the hospital and running red lights and saying, "Oh my gosh, if we don't get this person there, they're having a heart attack. We've got to get them to the ER right away." And then they arrive at the ER and they sit outside and they say, "Well, we're going to think about this one for a little bit." Make you reconsider whether they really have somebody who's having a heart attack inside, right? It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous what they've been doing here. And it just goes to show you that while the Democrats are always wagging a finger at Trump and, of course, his supporters, pretending that they're the mature, responsible ones, that there's a sense of normalcy that would return if only Trump were not president. There's nothing that they are unwilling. There's no level of foolishness that they're unwilling to approach in these areas, and it's a shame, really. I'm trying to find something, by the way. This was amazing. Gabriel Sherman, who's an oh-so-serious writer for either The New Yorker or New York Magazine, one and the same to me as far as I'm concerned, he tweeted this out. These libs are so crazy. It's amazing. I don't understand anymore. Like, what are they even? The Dow just broke 29,000. Not going to war. Country's great. Things are good. Gabe Sherman tweeted this out. There's something super disconcerting hearing NPR anchors talk about Trump in that soothing NPR voice. Normalizes Trump in a way that he shouldn't be. You're not even allowed to speak in normal tones. I'm not making this up. You're not allowed to speak in normal tones about Trump because that normalizes him. That's a problem now. If they're not crazy, if these people aren't crazy, what is the explanation? I mean, what has happened to them? Maybe in this world we live in where you have the constant, interaction and interfacing with all these different, social media, and you've got these echo chambers of ideology and people that never have to engage with the other side in a meaningful way. And it's like we're all being trained as little, well, at least the libs are all being trained as little lab rats to just think orange man bad all day. And we see the consequences of this. We see it playing out in real life around us all the time. Gabe Sherman. NPR has to be like, Trump, oh my gosh, every time they talk about him. All right, we got our buddy Chadwick Moore in the house. He is a columnist for Spectator USA. He's joining us now. He has hosted the show before. He has insights on many things. Mr. Chadwick, how are you, sir?
Hey, Buck, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm good, dude. So Pelosi has said she's going to be sending the articles over next week. What do you think is the current – is the Democratic Party in a little bit of a quiet panic right now because it didn't get what it wanted from the Mueller probe. It didn't get what it wanted from impeachment. Its candidates look super weak. I mean, try to walk me through in your mind where they're at right now.
Quiet panic is really insightful and perfect, I think, because the panic was loud and violent up until all this impeachment nonsense, I think. And maybe reality is starting to set in a bit, that everything they try to throw at the president completely fails. And no one's interested in impeachment. This is the third time in history that a president has been impeached, and the first time that no one cares. And if you look at the polls, especially with independent voters, it's something like 60% say they're not paying attention and they don't even care about this. You're also exactly right to bring up the fact that their candidates are completely lackluster. There's no enthusiasm really behind any of them, with the exception of the kind of fringe figures like Yang or Gabbard, but Gabbard's been kind of booted out of the club. So what else do they have but just sort of go through the motions of what they've already started? and they're not expecting anything to happen. And what's the Senate going to do? They're not going to vote to impeach him.
I'm just curious, because we've talked before on the show about Mayor Pete and how there is a sense from within, and you told me this, and I've seen this written about elsewhere. There's a sense from within the gay community that Mayor Pete is somehow, how do we describe it? Not gay enough or representative enough of the gay community, right? That's where on the left right now. Is there one candidate who has the majority of LGBTQ advocacy and institutional support? Like who, you know what I mean? I mean, Biden, for example, does the best with African-American voters in the primary. Who is the choice of LGBTQ voters if it's not Mayor Pete in the Democratic primary? Is there somebody?
That's a great question. And no, I don't think there's someone. I see more enthusiasm for Warren from gay voters than for Pete. Gay voters don't like Mayor Pete. They don't like him at all. They're kind of, you'll watch the gay magazines and blogs that are kind of forced to celebrate him, but you get the sense that it's very inauthentic. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. Firstly is LGBT, this kind of monolithic lobbying device and media machine that really doesn't have anything to do with gay individuals, but more left-wing political ideology, more support of the Democratic Party, more of this kind of neo-Marxism. They don't like him because he's a white male and he's allegedly Christian. And that's not what they're about. It doesn't matter if he's gay. It's the white male thing that they really despise. And also, so he's not woke enough in that sense. And another thing is that gay people just don't see him as a kind of representative of gay culture and gay community. I mean, he came out very late in life when people were kind of, when it was also very politically expedient, married the first guy he dated. And it's, that he doesn't really seem like the gays that most people know at the drag shows having brunch with their friends or whatever. His big fans, I think, are straight people in media institutions like New York Magazine and the New York Times and CNN and MSNBC. That's kind of where his enthusiasm is.
I mean, you live out in Brooklyn among the hipsters, and
yeah.
I'm just wondering who is the, if you're super woke, if you write for Deadspin and HuffPo, are you a Bernie person? Is that how it breaks down? I'm trying to get what a sense is here. I'm trying to get a sense of like the flavors of leftism in this primary. Like who's going for who? Because I know there's a lot of them right now and that are running.
Right, and it's a great question, and there's no good answer for it. The hipsters out in my neighborhood, they're kind of fractured between Warren and There's still the Bernie residuals from 2016, but the enthusiasm isn't there that was in 2016. And a lot of those Bernie people, if he doesn't get the nomination, they're going to stay home, or they might vote Trump. I've heard Bernie people, far left socialists, say they would vote for Trump over anyone besides Bernie, which is very interesting. It's still that hatred of the Democrat Party and the machine that a lot of them have when they feel they got shafted by Hillary, which they did. So I really don't see the woke candidate. Now, what's going to happen, what I think, is whoever gets the nomination, probably Biden or maybe Warren, they're going to have to pick the woke vice president to get those people energized. It's going to have to be like the woman of color, the Stacey Abrams or someone like that. That's when I think you're going to see the kind of hipster and social justice enthusiasm come in. But right now, for the top of the ticket, they're just not really on board, and Tulsi could maybe have done it, but the party hates her and they've shafted her too. So who knows?
I'm a little surprised that there hasn't been more of, I talked to David Harsanyi from National Review about this yesterday because he referred to the Democrats as socialists, and I say this now all the time. I said, why can't we call them? They're socialists. I mean, this was considered a slur under the Obama administration, and people even said that there were racial undertones to referring to President Obama's socialism. I'm like, no, he just likes socialism. It has nothing to do with anything that is racial in nature. But that was the way they shut it down then. Now you've got Bernie Sanders running. Elizabeth Warren's policies are, for most folks, I think, essentially indistinguishable from Bernie Sanders. Who is saying he's a democratic socialist. But the hard left hasn't really yet embraced being called socialist, which I find so interesting. You know, you'll have people that are get very huffy. They say Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist. It's like, okay, well, so what? He's still well, you know, do you think is that gamesmanship just about trying to fool people who are not quite as far left, or are they just being just being ornery for why not just admit that they're socialists? I guess is what I'm getting to now.
Right, and Maduro down in Venezuela is also literally a democratic socialist. There are elections there, so there you have that. Good question. I mean, you do have, especially the younger you go. So that a lot of college students and fresh out of college do embrace socialists, even go as far to say communist. Antifa is obviously very openly, they use those words to describe themselves. I think with the mainstream, I mean, this is a good question, and I think a lot of it has to do with, if you look at someone like Warren, I mean, socialism looks very different today than if you're talking about like Red Scare era America, right? And we know that firstly because the targets have changed. It's no longer about the working class versus the leadership class, because these left wingers are all rich people. So they took the old, this is what neo-Marxism did. They took the old economic oppressors and they turned it into race and class. So the straight white male became the new target over the the workers versus the managers or whatever. So with that, I think comes because so many of these socialists, like Elizabeth Warren, are wealthy people who benefited from the so-called private market. You see that their corporatism, like Hillary Clinton's, their big corporatism is a new kind of socialism that we haven't seen before. It's not the Soviet Union. It's a lot of these private, massive companies that support them and donate to them, which kind of want to get in bed with the government. And it's something new that they don't perhaps like that term, but it's and it's not the term I grew up with, but it's still the same thing. It just has new characters and new forces at play.
Yeah, even in the most even really the most socialist economies, there's always some version of market economics at work. I mean, you can't entirely escape the market. So when you're discussing socialism, it's always a question of degree, really. There's people say, well, it's never really been tried, or there's no one ever has done pure socialism. Well, yeah, pure socialism is actually not really possible. But I would put out there that I do think that whoever the next Democrat president is, I think is going to be running. I mean, I think it's going to be somebody who is, if we're being honest, accurately described as a full-on socialist. I think that that's true.
I don't see how else they could win if they aren't, because they need that. That's where the party's going, and they need that support and energy behind them if they're not going full-on socialist. And Liz Warren's one of those people just will go whichever way the wind's blowing and says she has a plan for everything. So if socialism is what it is, then that's what she's going to do.
Are you a little, by the way, are you a little just stunned by the resilience of Elizabeth Warren? I mean, I keep bringing this up on radio. When she did her whole DNA, 23andMe thing, whatever that was, and it was like, I'm 1,024th Native American. And like Democrats have all just forgotten about that bit. Like, yeah, whatever. That's amazing.
I gotta say, I have to give her some props for the fact that she powered through that and has kind of owned it. That's amazing within itself. I'm also supremely impressed by the fact that she wears the exact same black cat suit with a different colored blazer on top of it every time she appears anywhere. That's equally impressive. So yeah, she's managed to escape the Pocahontas slurs somehow. Good for her.
All right. Well, by the way, before I let you go, Epstein, they just told us now, this is official, this isn't a court filing, that they've lost forever erased the Manhattan Correctional Facility video of right outside, which was what you would need to see to know who's going in and out of the cell. The night Epstein killed himself, that footage from that camera in a court filing is gone forever. And they look at us all and we're all supposed to say, oh, okay, sure.
Isn't that incredible? And their explanation is they preserved the footage, and then it turned out to be from a different floor and the wrong camera, and now the correct footage is, oops, it's been deleted. Oh, okay, yeah, we all believe this. I don't know if you caught that CBS. I don't know if there's 60 Minutes, whatever shows on CBS. When they did a big expose about it, it's almost undeniable. You look at the injuries on his neck. They have the photos, and they're like, this is not hanging. This is strangulation. So guess we'll never know.
I mean, do you have a theory, or are you just like, you don't accept the way things are right now?
I think, I mean, it doesn't seem like he killed himself. I mean, and it does. I mean, that's what everyone believes. I mean, this is one of those issues that's uniting the left and the right. Anyone who's outside of the elite of the Democrat Party, maybe. But it's looking towards you have these medical examiners, just for the nature of the injuries, which the 3 bones broken in his neck, which this medical examiner had said he's never ever seen before from a hanging. The fact that if you look at the lacerations on his neck, they're in the center of his neck. Well, if you're hanging yourself, the lacerations are going to be up underneath your jawline because of gravity. So you pull down. This is on the center of his neck. So how do you hang yourself with that? With creating those kind of injuries. Another thing is they released photographs of his cell. Now, this is someone who was supposed to have been on suicide watch. They took him off suicide watch. He claims he never killed himself before he died, or tried to kill himself before he died. He said he was attacked by his cellmate. So they released photos of his cell. In his cell, there is an electrical cord for some device he had. There are ballpoint pens. There's all sorts of items you could use to easily kill yourself. And this was done with a piece of cloth that doesn't look like it could cause those the types of injuries on his neck if you look at the photographs, and they're very graphic and very sharp injury to his neck.
Yeah, I just have to wonder also, at what point is it fair to say that we're being asked to be coincidence theorists here? Like, this is just that no one's ever died in the MCC before in this way, like, killed himself under this similar set of circumstances where they've had very high security around them. The footage is gone. You have Dr. Bodden. I know he's being paid by Epstein's brother to do the autopsy, but I don't think this guy is going to, why would he lie about what's in the autopsy? It doesn't seem to make any sense to me. He's the most famous autopsy person in the world, as far as I know. And he's saying there's no way the hyoid bone was. You add all this up, and at some point it's like, I mean, when are we supposed to say that this is just not going to fly? I think we're kind of already there. Oh wait, well, before we let you go, also Justin Trudeau's beard, up or down on the a thumbs up or thumbs down?
No, thumbs down. Oh my God.
Your anti-Trudeau beard. Okay. At least we got the important stuff out today. Chadwick Moore, everybody, follow him on Twitter. Check out The Spectator, where he writes good things. Chadwick will come back and host the show sometime soon. Chadwick, thank you, sir.
Thanks so much, Buck.
Well, if I had an eye problem, I would go to him. If I had a constitutional question, he'd be the last guy I would pick.
Ooh, Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham getting a little feisty there with Rand Paul. Go to him with an eye problem, not with a constitutional problem. Fair enough. I just kind of like that line. I enjoy when Lindsey Graham decides he's going to kind of, strut his stuff and throw some elbows and get a little. Hey, you got to give him credit for what he did at the moment of truth in the Kavanaugh hearing. I'll never forget. Lindsey Graham was the guy who stood up and made it happen and gave the speech that needed to be given. Said the things that needed to be said at that point in time, at that moment. So, anyway, I mean, I'm also somebody, I try not to do the conspiracy stuff. I know we're just talking to Chadwick Moore a moment ago about Epstein, but let's be real here for a second, guys. There's so much that we're being asked to accept with all this. There's so much we're being asked to just assume happened. It's happenstance. There's nothing more to it than that. And I'm long past the point where I'm willing to accept that this is what we're being told that it is. This guy got a deal. I mean, can we just do a quick review here of the Epstein things? This guy got a deal that nobody would ever get under similar circumstances involving, crimes, sexual crimes against minors. The most sweetheart deal you could ever imagine. This guy then was able to continue on in public life and have connections to the most powerful people in the world for years and years and years. No one really knows how he made his money. He lived in an $80 million house in New York City that he didn't even buy. It was kind of given to him. No one really understands that. He was running a surveillance operation, and we have no tapes of nothing has been found by the FBI with the surveillance tapes of what he was taping and all that stuff. And then the whole suicide situation, which we went through in some detail before, it's just too much. I mean, I'm sorry. I can't believe in this string of coincidences. I can't sit here and tell you that it's something that adds up. It flatly does not. It blatantly requires you to suspend far too much disbelief to come to the conclusion that this is, this is the way, that what we're being told is what really happened. Maybe it is what happened, but there's a lot more that we don't know that we need to know to understand what went on here. Anyway, are we going to talk about the royal family in the show? We might have my friend from the Examiner, Tiana Lowe, join to tell us about that, because everyone's all, ooh. I'm pretty sure we fought a war against the British and won so that we could spend the rest of human history never thinking about the royal family ever again, but maybe there's a lesson to be learned here.